Thank you everyone for taking the time to show up as we celebrate Lisa. And we have this conversation between Molly Zaentz, class of 09, and someone who many of you I know hold dear to their hearts, Lisa Kassow. This evening, we also have my partner in crime, Melissa Bronzino Regan, class of 87. She's the Associate Director of Alumni Relations, and she's the person working behind the scenes this evening. So if you have any questions about the Women's Leadership Council and how to get involved after tonight, please feel free to contact her. And I am Urel Silverio Marshall, class of 96. I am the programming chair for Trinity's Women's Leadership Council. And I just love having these events and making these connections and seeing all the wonderful faces. So again, I want to say thank you. Before we get started, here are a few housekeeping notes. First, we suggest you use the speaker view. If you see in the top right corner of your screen, it says view. And if you choose speaker view, you get to see, you know, the person that's primary. Your feedback is also important to us. So you're going to receive a post-event email from Melissa tomorrow that includes a survey. If you could take just a few minutes to let us know how you felt the event went, and if you have any suggestions for future events, anything and everything, we're open to all suggestions. Our hope for tonight's program is that it's going to be a conversation. We get to sit in and hear the conversation between Molly and Lisa, but we also invite our audience to participate. So if you see at the bottom of your screen, there is the chat. So you could use the chat to ask any questions, to offer any comments as you're listening to the conversation. You can even use the reaction. If you see, there's a button that says reaction, and you can clap and thumbs up and say you love something and raise your hand. So there's a whole way for you to become part of the conversation. And I will be monitoring the chat to make sure that Molly and Lisa are informed of anything that you might mention. As the WLC proudly honors Jewish Heritage Month, please join me in welcoming Lisa and Molly. And I'll have Molly quickly introduce herself, give a little bit of background before they start their conversation.
Thanks, Urel. It's hard to believe it's been 18 years since my dad strongly encouraged me to walk into the Zach's Hillel house when I was touring Trinity as an 11th grader. That was when I first met Lisa and started to imagine my life as a college student. What I couldn't have imagined then was that Hillel would become such a meaningful part of my professional life, where I work for the New York Federation, managing its funding of Hillel International and many Hillel campuses in New York. Lisa, I know you remember that day and many other times over the years when you've been a mentor and friend to me and many others on this call, as a student, as a Jewish communal professional, and as a working mother. So I thought we'd start by asking you to speak about what led you and your family to West Hartford and to Trinity.
Well, the easy answer to, well, first, before we begin, I just want to say hello to this incredibly friendly group of people. I'm looking at faces I know well and have so enjoyed, people I've so enjoyed knowing over the years. And I thank you all for being here. It's great. It's great to see you. I feel like this is sort of like a family conversation. So the easy answer, Molly, is Sam Kassow. That's why I came to West Hartford and to Hartford. I was born and raised in Buffalo, New York. I went to Israel when I was 16. I did my first year of university in Israel and came back, studied art, went back to Israel, and where I was a young painter, and then I became a photographer. And about 12 years later, I met Sam Kassow. And Sam was at the time a full professor, he still is, at Trinity in history. And we had a decision to make, where would we live? And so he was a full professor with tenure, of course. I was a freelance photographer. So there, that question answered itself, although we were sad. We were sad to leave Israel. And I found myself in Hartford, Connecticut.
Great. And I think soon after that, you worked at Trinity Hillel for the first time in 1992.
Right.
So tell us more about what Hillel was like then.
Okay. Well, it was very different. And maybe some people remember, maybe some people on the call remember what it was like. Hillel, even though Hillel had been established in 1946 or 7 or 8, there's different ideas about that. It had never been a big club, and it didn't have a really great space. So for quite a while, probably a couple decades, Hillel met on Crescent Street on the first floor of a 2-family home that was quite small and not adequate for the needs of the organization. Little shabby, and during the first iteration of my tenure at Trinity, I was there for 2 years, 92 to 94, and I just loved it. I was the part-time 10-hour-a-week Hillel advisor. I had 1 small child, and I had so much fun in this job. It was great. So, yeah.
And I see Henry on this call. Nice to have him with us. In 2001, construction on the Zaentz Hillel house had started, and you came back to Trinity in your professional role. And I thought you could tell us more about what that was like and what kinds of things the house actually allowed you to do that were new at the time.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was just absolutely a remarkable time in my life. And I am so happy that this all happened. It was the beginning of really a great time for me at Hillel. So before that, I had worked at the JCC, and I had done a lot of programming at the JCC, Adult Ed, the Film Festival, Book Festival, cultural programming, things like that. So that was a good background, for knowing about programming, and I had the Israel experience behind me, and I had Hebrew. And when this job opened up at Trinity, my family and I just felt it was made to order. It was just perfect for me, just exactly right then. We had 2 daughters, young daughters, and the schedule could be somewhat flexible. That was very important for me because I had to do pickup every day, and I often worked during the day, did what I did, went to pick up the kids, and then went back to Hillel to do evening programming. So it was a really interesting time, and a time of growth and creativity, and really lots of goodwill amongst everybody at the college and in the community to help build this program. I was very lucky. There were fantastic students who were involved in the program at that time, student leaders who loved Jewish life, loved Yiddishkeit, loved leading services, and I felt I just felt that it was a very easy transition for me, and I learned from them. And quickly, I learned that it really depends on the students. The success of a program or the success of any initiative at Hillel depends on the students, their interests, their passions, their commitment, their leadership. And so the idea that a Hillel director should be knowledgeable, certainly, but more of a guide, guide on the side is how I like to think of it. And from the beginning, I could work with students in that way. It was just, it was great. But you asked about specific programs and innovations at the time. So I'll look, Shabbat has been Shabbat for thousands of years, right? But we did Shabbat at Hillel, the first years, was kind of like an extravaganza. And we developed a program of themed Shabbatot that were really exciting. And we would pick a theme, maybe a Jewish community in the history of the Jewish community of Iraq or India or someplace in the world. We'd invite someone to talk about that, usually a professor who understood the field and had something to say. We would co-sponsor with other organizations, bringing in all kinds of students to Hillel. And we would come up with a great program. We would decorate the room according to the colors of the country, and we'd cook a meal from that place in the world. And so it would just be sort of a whole experience. And I think for many years, people really looked forward to those themed Shabbatot that were really fun to produce.
So you worked with hundreds of students over the past 2 decades. And going back to what you shared earlier about the program really being driven by student interests and passions, that you might share a few stories of how students have influenced you or have shaped how Trinity's Hillel has evolved over the past 20 years.
Yeah. That's a big question. Every year there is a different cohort of students. Therefore, every year the emphasis of programming changes and the interests change. So it very much depends. And I've been doing it for a long time, so there have been a lot of cohorts. I can say, Molly, that one of the highlight experiences of my time at Trinity was developing with you Pink Shabbat for Breast Cancer Awareness, which is a program that is now in its 15th year. Yep. It got a little waylaid by the pandemic, so we lost count a little bit, but it's a very, very strong program that brings lots of different students together from different organizations to focus on breast cancer awareness through a Jewish lens and through Jewish experience, because Jewish experience with breast cancer is different than with other communities. And we have other things to be concerned about. And so to share that information, to talk about innovations, to talk about research, to talk about research in Israel, to bring in lots and lots of different elements. And I can tell this group, Molly accompanied me with some other students, I think, to a conference, must have been about 2005, something like that.
Yeah.
And the conference was about social justice and good things that you can do. And there was there was a fair of all kinds of organizations, and there were representatives from all kinds of social service organizations in this room. It seemed like hundreds of them. And Molly and I and others walked around, and we met a lot of people. And we listened to a lot of very, very compelling stories about needs in the world. And we chose a couple of projects to focus on. One was breast cancer awareness with the organization Sharsheret, which is Sharsheret means chain in Hebrew, and it's a fantastic organization that's grown and grown, that supports women and families dealing with breast and ovarian cancer, and other projects as well.
There was one, Mazon was there.
Right.
And
right.
I ended up doing a fellowship representing Trinity. I can't remember exactly what I did in the fellowship, but I think it was the conference and getting program ideas from kind of walking around and meeting people was some of the best professional development I did at Trinity. You know,
Yeah.
far outside the classroom. I think the conference was in Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those experiences were so impactful. Yeah. And I remember lobbying our congressman. I don't remember about what, but maybe Darfur. Maybe it was about Darfur. It was very, very impactful. Yeah. So that program we can continue, but let's ask me more.
Okay, I'll ask you more. So just on the topic of impactful student experiences, Israel, of course, is a big part of how Trinity students, Jewish and non-Jewish, have engaged with Hillel over the years. And everyone, I think, on the call knows that you have a deep relationship with Israel. And an appreciation and lots of knowledge of its history, culture, its food, and its art. And you've led many Trinity Hillel and I think Connecticut Hillel trips to Israel. And you've also encouraged lots and lots of students to go on Israel, go to Israel on Birthright and other trips. And I think to start on the conversation about Israel, as you reflect on your time at Trinity, I think it'd be nice to hear what stands out to you about how Trinity's students and faculty and the campus overall have faced Israel climate over the years.
Yeah, there are lots of pieces to that question.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll appreciate it if you keep me on track.
Okay.
I want to set the record straight. I personally have not led Birthright trips. I've led other trips, but not specifically Birthright. And the reason was because I feel like I started this Hillel job a little bit too old to be the facilitator or leader on a Birthright trip. I mean, you've got to sleep on the ground in a Bedouin tent and all this stuff. I just like, I did that when I was 16. I don't want to do that now. So I didn't do that, but I did meet students who were in Israel either on Birthright or other trips or studying abroad. Because I happened to be there. And over the years, we've gone back so many times. And I was really lucky. I participated in a Hartman Fellowship for senior Hillel directors that gave us that was just a fantastic curriculum. And that went on over a couple of summers. So I was there a lot, And I met students there a lot, and that was always great. The trips that I have led that have been, talk about impactful, have been trips that involve both Jewish students and non-Jewish students. Trips that aim to educate students about what life is really like on the ground, and to highlight the incredible cultural diversity of Israel, and lots of social and political and economic realities. So trips that I've participated in or led have been in that arena, and not so much in the arena of birthright or forming Jewish identity, which is what Birthright is intending to do. Those trips have been absolutely amazing, and sometimes you're going to have to pull me back if I'm not answering your question.
Sometimes question in mind when you finish.
Okay. Sometimes we've been able to take students on those trips who are really outliers, and we've even taken Palestinian students on a couple of those trips, which I have learned is not a normal thing to do. We did manage to do it, and it was quite amazing to have those voices in the room with our Jewish students and other students, non-Jewish students, other kinds of student leaders. So they've been very, very enriching altogether.
So I think you're modest about the knowledge you have of Israel and what a resource you are to students who are figuring out, their own opinions as young adults and wrestling with real world current events, and getting into conversations with that about them with other students from across the country and maybe around the world, and with professors. And when I look back at my time at Trinity, I appreciate very much that I was always able to speak openly about Israel. I never felt that I was at risk of being insulted or attacked, or I felt safe to ask questions at Hillel and outside of Hillel. And I think that's very special. That's something that you have definitely played a role in fostering at Trinity over the years. And I hope you can speak to why you think Trinity's campus has been a place like that for so many years for Jewish students.
I think it definitely helps to have a lot of experience, and I appreciate you saying that. And to be comfortable in my own thoughts and feelings about Israel and my own connection, my own history, my husband's history, and to be able to engage, with a knowledge base. It helps. It helps. In terms of our Israel engagement, we've been really, really lucky because we put up a good front. We have a Jewish studies major and minor. We have a minor in Hebrew. Hebrew is well integrated into the Department of Modern Languages and whatever it's called, cultural studies. So that's several levels of Hebrew. There's Israeli culture is always a class that's taught at Trinity, and I think there have even been freshman seminars in Israeli culture. And so if you can study Israel, if a student can study Israel or the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, a history of the conflict, in an academic arena, and feels safe with the professors, feels safe with the Hillel director. It creates and feels safe also because the college has clearly put resources behind supporting Jewish life. We have this beautiful building. Thank you, Henry Zaentz. I think you're on the call. The Zaentz Hillel House, which is maintained by the college. It's a college facility. Everything is integrated.
And
So
it's on Vernon Street. It's not hidden in a student center or off campus. It's
right,
right in the center of things, and its door is always open
that's right.
to all students.
That's right, to all students, yes. So I think, and my attitude about Israel engagement on campus has always been just building one that builds on education, one that, and in every aspect of Jewish life, but particularly about Israel on a college campus. You want to be able to offer different kinds of programs that will appeal to people who have varying interests, the environment, different kinds of cultural studies, and show a multi-ethnic society, and show a society that cares about others. So we've had a wonderful time doing that.
That's the other point I would add, that Pink Shabbat also touches on this. I think you have set a foundation at Trinity's Hillel that Jewish students show up for other students on campus at all times, and for lots of different causes and current events. And that's meant that students show up for Jewish students. And it's really worked. And the Hillel House has, I think, served as a physical representation of that in lots of ways.
Yeah. One of the things that I love is to when there is some kind of a co-sponsored program. Another example is the Rainbow Shabbat in support of the LGBTQ community on campus or wherever. We've had a lot of interesting experiences with that, different kinds of presenters and musical services, and we've had students talking about what it's like to be gay in Tel Aviv, and the gay parade in Tel Aviv, and discussing homosexuality in the Middle East and the problems with that. And we lots of different ways to approach the subject and bring it into a realm that is relatable and for students. And for me to stand back and just sort of watch it all happen, and watch these relationships and these conversations over the table and unlikely partners, that has been a real thrill, bringing all kinds of people together.
Molly, there's actually let's see, Joy Brownstein has a question or a comment.
Hi, Lisa.
Hey, Joy.
I wanted to hear you talk a little bit about some of the alternative spring break trips you have organized over the years.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Those have been some of the best experiences of my life, not just experiences at Hillel. I've had the opportunity to travel with students to very, very interesting places. And actually, Joy's daughter, Allie, who I think is on the call, accompanied me. Allie, were you a freshman or a sophomore? when we
I was
went,
a freshman.
you were a freshman. We
Mhm.
went together to Poland in 2014 with about, I don't know, 10 or so more. It was
Yeah,
bigger.
12.
12 Trinity students. And we had an extraordinary experience. We went to Warsaw, we went to Krakow, and we went to Auschwitz. And we spent time meeting young Jews at the JCC in Warsaw. And I mean, to
And
think
the
about,
Moishe House.
and a Moishe house. And it was quite an experience. And it was also 2014 was the year that the Polin Museum of the History of Polish Jews in Warsaw opened. And that project had been going on for, I don't know, at least 10 years, and it was under construction for at least 6. And that year it opened. And my husband, Sam, was in charge of 2 of the 8 galleries in that museum. So that project was, we lived with that project for many years. And Sam and I were able to take this group of students around the museum, along with the chief curator of the museum. Do you remember, Ellie? And talk about not only this magnificent work in progress, but the history of it, how it developed, everything that went into it, all of the ideas that were coming to fruition. It was incredibly exciting. It was incredibly exciting, that trip. Another trip that was equally as exciting was to Uganda. And I went with, it was a trip with students from Wellesley and Babson College and Trinity. And that was because of a very close friend of mine, who was a Hillel director at Wellesley at the time. And I wanted to do that trip together. So we put it together, and we stayed with the Abba Yudaya community in Uganda, the Jewish community of Uganda, which is about 2,000 people. They're conservative Jews. They were all officially converted to as conservative Jews just a couple years ago. It was an extraordinary experience, and one of the most memorable experiences was being there on Shabbat and learning the nigunim that they sing that are African, and you know, to Hebrew prayers, and it's just an extraordinary experience.
Thanks for sharing those stories. Back to Israel for just another minute or two. I felt, since many of us on the call are part of this project, I thought you might just tell us more about the many portraits of students taken over the years that hang inside the Zach's Hillel house, and how that came to be.
That so that was a combination of interests: photography, Israel, Hillel. It all just kind of came together, and Molly, that for 20 years, every year I fall in love with some students. So and those students frequently are, they're the students who are most active and want to engage. And those are the students who end up going to Israel in one way or another, and coming back and bringing something to the table from their experience that has truly enhanced the Hillel community. So every single person on that wall has done that in one way or another. And it's just a sweet little labor of love for me. So I look at your picture, and you are like, what, forever 18? No?
Yeah.
Yep. And there are others on the call who are exactly the same. You're always that age to me. And no matter if I see you as adults, and I have seen many of you as adults over the years, and even parents, and I've seen you with your kids, and you're still that kid to me. And I just, I walk by those photos every day that I'm there, and have for years and years. And it's like a family. There are five. I counted it the other day. There are 5 spaces left. So I'm gonna have to choose carefully, but I'm determined. I'll fill it up before I leave.
How many are there?
Oh, 30-ish.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so on to some other passions of yours. We've talked about Israel and photography, traveling. I felt like we should talk about cooking.
Mm.
So this year, you're doing a very cool thing. Trinity has new wellness courses for students in a whole range of different wellness activities. And you're teaching a group of students about Jewish cooking and cooking in the Hillel house. And I know you're having a lot of fun with it. I thought you could tell us a little about what you're doing there, and also just share some memories about cooking with students, the Hillel House kitchen, and reflecting on what it's meant over the years to not only make the Zaentz Hillel House feel like a home away from home for students over decades, but also many of us on this call have fond memories of being invited to your own home for Sukkot or other meals, and eating at your own dining table with your family.
Mm. Well, all of that in me comes from is a direct line. I'm a direct line from my own mother and my grandmother. And my maternal grandmother has, throughout my entire adult life, been my cooking muse. I think of her all the time. And she was hilarious. And anyway, that's for another time. But this has been a great joy, of course, cooking at Hillel and running these programs. The idea behind the wellness program is really great. It's to encourage students to do something that is not academic, and that is not looking at their phone. And there's some kind of a structure. You have to have some kind of a structure. They need 8 hours of whatever this experience is to get the wellness credit. So in this course that I'm doing with the help of Leah, who's on the call, and she's always a tremendous support at Hillel. And I think Leah's learned how to make a whole bunch of stuff as we've worked together. And also Michal Ayalon, who is the former Hebrew professor at Trinity, and she retired just a year or two ago. And we used to cook together when she was teaching. She did a few sessions on food in Hebrew in the Hillel kitchen, and that was always just tremendous fun with her students. Anyway, this has been, I am endlessly fascinated by Jewish cooking and cuisine and culture and how it all comes together. And I think it's a fantastic way to teach students about different cultures and about a culture of adaptation, because that's what Jewish cooking is. It's a culture of, it's adapting a cuisine from wherever you are in the world, the diaspora, to the needs of Jewish practice and kashrut. And it's a subject that and I just endlessly am happy to engage with. Yeah, I remember last year or year before, maybe it was the first year of the pandemic, I did a Zoom program about charoset from around the world in my kitchen. And I had a student standing far away from me, masked, with his phone, and we offered this program. It was, it was just a way to keep people engaged. But I thought it was great.
Yeah, there's always been a lot of fun with food at Hillel.
Mhm.
Spirit. So you're talking about students taking 8 hours away from their phones. And I'm thinking about my own college life when we did have cell phones, but we really didn't use them that much. There was some texting, but I feel like we were in the last group where we said, I'll see you at Mather at 6:30, and people just showed up. And I didn't text anyone if I was 5 minutes late. I just knew students were there. And I think that's one of many examples of why students today are so different.
Mhm.
I thought you could just share some reflections on the biggest changes you've seen in students now in this pandemic, or maybe post-pandemic 2022 versus in 2001 when the Zach's Hillel House was just opening.
Yeah.
And also what stayed the same.
Oh, I think what's different, you've alluded to, technology has really entered our lives in such a way that we're different. I mean, we relate to each other differently.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a huge difference. But more than that, and I think a big difference is that the students who are here now are a generation further away from Europe or from wherever their ancestors came from. So 20 years ago, or even 15 years ago, there would be grandparents who would come to Hillel and speak Yiddish. It was, and so the students themselves had a different background, had just that much closer to Yiddishkeit and to Jewish experience, and of course to and to the Holocaust. That's a difference. And in fact, just a couple days ago, we had a Yom HaShoah commemoration at Hillel, and a child of somebody who's an extraordinary human being, who's had a brilliant life as a pediatric cardiologist, but was a hidden child, actually in Ukraine, spoke. And it was very moving for everybody. And afterwards, one student said, I realized that I'm part of the last generation who's going to ever see these people or know these people or, have any firsthand interaction with these people. That's really, it's really a powerful thought. Like, what happens next? And I do see a difference. I see a difference in knowledge. I see a difference about Jewish life. I think that it's also affected by intermarriage to some degree. What's the same is that there are students who are very, very genuine in their desire to learn and to be open and to be part of this community. And they may come to it from different backgrounds than 20 years ago, but their hearts are right there, and they want that connection and they want that engagement, and they want to know more about Jewish life and about Israel. So that's the same.
So I know we want to open it up for questions from our group. I thought before we do that, just ask one last question. If you could just share a favorite memory or two with the group.
A favorite memory.
Gotta unmute.
Am I muted? Am I
I
muted?
was on mute. It
Oh,
was
you.
I thought this session was lovely.
Oh, thank
I
you.
think a great turnout. A tribute to Lisa, a tribute to her assistant Leah, who's been great. And we hope that things move on over the next few years as well as it's been for the past 20, and I'm sure it will.
Yeah. Thanks, Henry.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Great. So it's a really, I'll tell you, can I share like two memories? One is Passover Seders. I love Passover Seders at Hillel. I love them. There's such a, first of all, the students really do want to talk about the themes of the holiday. They, it's a wonderful opportunity to kind of get a little bit dressed up and to make the dining room look gorgeous. And as Leah did this year with really beautiful flowers. And I am a child, I love acting out the plagues. At some point, my family tells me that at some point I have to grow up and not do a pediatric Seder, not do a Seder for little kids, because I love acting out the plague. So that's a memory. Chasing the chosen firstborn around with a squirt gun.
Has to be someone who hasn't been to the Seder before. That's the important part.
The plagues. Yeah.
No, the person who gets the shirt.
The shirt with there's a shirt that says firstborn. That person doesn't know that what's going to happen.
That you have water guns.
And then that person gets chased around with water gun. And the other just sort of mainstay memory is that sense of when we don't have like a Shabbat that's an extravaganza, when it's a Shabbat that is just what we call family Shabbat, where we're just sitting around the table and we sing together and we eat together and we just have a beautiful evening, a beautiful Shabbat dinner. And it just feels as lovely as can be. And I've always loved it. So that's sort of my favorite memory.
Yarel, do we open the questions in the chat or?
Yes.
Yeah, great.
I did not see any questions per se, but there are some comments. Art says, in the promo to tonight's wonderful presentation, someone said that he or she couldn't imagine Trinity Hillel without Lisa. I can tell you what it was like 30, 40 years before she was involved in the early 60s. So he continues, 12 to 15 Jewish students met once per month or less often, not sure, with a different speaker in a room and then the new Mather Center at that time. And that was totally Trinity Hillel at that time. And then he continues to say, my wife and I have been so pleased and impressed with the extreme growth of Hillel at that time when we returned to campus and viewed the communications from the campus. A further source of pleasure is the apparent involvement of the college, much more so than it seemed 60 years ago. So kudos to you. And this is from our class of 64, calling in from New Hampshire, or connected in New Hampshire. And then Pinal Patel says, "Dear Lisa, your love for holistic health and wellness with your experience is so inspirational. Best." And I see that Shauna is raising her hand. Go ahead, Shauna.
Hi, Lisa. Oh,
Hey,
it's so good to
Shauna.
see you.
So good to
Hello,
see
hello.
you too. Where are you?
I'm in Long Beach, California. So my question is, and I think the thing that you don't give yourself enough credit for is just your amazing ability to create community. Where do you think you got that from? Like, was that something that was your family? Like, where do you pull your inspiration from to bring people together? Because I think that's your gift and something that I try to replicate and think about you so often when I'm creating community.
Wow. Thank you, Shauna. Wow. Well, I'm going to give it to my mom. My mom was like, you know, she was kind of the belle of the ball, and she always had people over, and was a community organizer in her own way, very involved in Jewish life and Jewish causes throughout her life. And I watched her and I learned from her. So my mom, and also it was the opportunity, you know, it was being like having that in my heart at that moment, and then just having the opportunity to pull it all together. So you're right that that's something that has motivated me over the years a lot. And I have to thank everybody, everyone who participated in our Hillel community over the years. I certainly have to thank Henry for making it all possible. And it's just been a whole bunch of great circumstances.
Alexandra?
Hi, Lisa.
Hey.
I guess my question is, I obviously want to echo what everybody has said, that how special you are to the, not only like the Hillel community, but also to just the Trinity College community. And I think that your presence on campus will be missed greatly, and that's an understatement. But I guess one of my questions for you would be, what do you hope that students take away from their experience with you and at Trinity Hillel?
That's a great question. Something that Shauna actually just kind of brought up. So something that I learned from students is that, and this was from the students who were like the Jewish students who you'd expect to go to Hillel, and students who just somehow ended up coming to Hillel, who you wouldn't expect to come to Hillel, maybe from other backgrounds. What I learned was you do your best when you are really deeply open, when you really listen, and you understand you make an effort to understand the other person. And at some point, I kind of felt like, okay, this is not a Jewish concept. I think it's a Christian concept called radical hospitality. But what I hope is that people at Trinity, the students who engage with our program, or have engaged with our program, or will in the future, will embody that kind of attitude, that to be open, to really listen, to be kind and compassionate, and to be very, very hospitable. Those are great Jewish values. Those are just good values.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And thank you, Molly, for having this conversation, allowing us to to participate. All of us, thank you for the audience members that supported as well as participated. I want to say this is the greatest participation. Lisa, even in a WLC event, you just bring in the crowd. And so as we wind down, again, I want to say thank you. I want to share a memory that was shared to me that is why the WLC is wanted to hold this event for you in your honor. And one of the memories is when the Hartford WLC had their Sunday afternoons at the movies, Lisa went with the group to see The Zookeeper's Wife, and then led a conversation afterwards about the Holocaust. She met with the New York City WLC at an Auschwitz exhibit at the Museum of Jewish History, and then joined Professor Dory Katz, who is a child of the Holocaust, for a conversation with the group afterwards. So these are meaningful conversations and ways to connect with our alumni. And we're ever grateful, and we can't imagine a better partner. And we look forward to more opportunities to connect with Hillel in other capacities, but you were really the conduit for that. So thank you again, Lisa, on behalf of the WLC. I'd like to remind the guests to watch out for that email, and if you could take a moment to respond to the post-event survey. For our alumni who haven't joined, please consider joining the Women's Leadership Council. Tomorrow, we're going to have a pseudo Cinco de Mayo Bantam style. In other words, I'm going to take that opportunity to teach a little bit more about why Cinco de Mayo exists. And I'll tell you, it's not about Mexico really, but it's also a nice way to have some fun. We've had some really serious conversations, so it's time to lighten the mood just a little bit as we wind down. And then on May 17th, we have our final Work in Women series, in which we bring in together all the women who have participated in the panel and having a conversation. So we have a lot of great events, and we hope to see many of you there. With that, I wish everyone a good night. Take care.
Thank you, everybody.